Okay, so the nervous system, it's a master communication and control system. Uh, it works quickly and fleetingly. So the nervous system controls muscles and glands. It's also keyed into the endocrine system. There's a structure in your brain, the pituitary gland, which releases many of the hormones that'll turn on the rest of the endocrine system. So the two are somewhat linked. Some hormones might be released independent of the nervous system, but the two are kind of keyed in together. So where we're going to go with this is talk about the nervous system in general and take a look at nervous tissue. Look at the divisions of the nervous system. And then we're going to start to take a look at the different divisions. Okay. Well, as far as the nervous system goes, here's how it works overall in general. You have what are termed receptors. So a receptor can be a cell. So receptor could be specific cell. Might even be an epithelial cell. So a Merkel cell, tactile epithelial cell, that's a receptor. It picks up light touch. Pacinian corpuscle, also known as a lamellar corpuscle. That is a nerve ending, but it's wrapped up, kind of like a lollipop almost. And that will detect deep pressure. So receptors could be the ends of a nerve cell, a neuron. Could be a specific cell, like a Merkel cell, these sort of things. So receptor detects stimuli. Hot, cold, pain, pressure, light touch. Then you have special receptors that detect light. You have receptors that detect chemicals. You have mechanical receptors that detect mechanical stimuli. That will include touch, all that. Okay, so receptors detect stimuli. So that stimuli is then sent via a nerve the stimulus generates a nerve impulse. The nerve impulse is known as an action potential. This is sent to what's called a sensory neuron. Neuron's a nerve cell. So a sensory neuron sends this stimulus to what's known as your central nervous system, brain, spinal cord. What happens there is a process known as integration. So process the information and send out a different signal or response to this stimulus. So integrates. And I'm not talking about the integral secant cubed theta d theta. I'm talking integrates. So what will be sent out is a motor response. Okay, response. To an effector organ. All right, so that's a perfectly awful mess. So we have a receptor. A receptor detects stimuli. The stimulus generates a nerve impulse. That nerve impulse travels to integration centers, typically in your brain or spinal cord. In the integration centers, a response is generated. The response is sent out a motor neuron. So that's a motor response to an effector organ, a muscle or gland. So example, you see a nice steaming hot pizza covered with anchovies and broccoli. You like this sort of thing. So this signal is received, integration happens, and a response is sent out. You start to salivate uncontrollably in anticipation of this broccoli and anchovy pizza. Okay, so that's it. Master control and communication system. What does it control? Always muscles or glands. So sensory receptors monitor changes inside your body and outside your body. Yeah, you do have sensory receptors that detect stretch in a joint, what's going on in your digestive tract, that sort of thing. Okay, stimulus, changes detected inside or outside. Sensory input, information is gathered by the receptors. It's sent to your central nervous system or an integration center. So there has to be processing and interpretation of the sensory input. So integration, that's the term for interpreting the input, which is going to send out a response by activating an effector organ. So the motor outputs the response. There's the big picture. It's a big picture. Okay. All right, a stimulus, water. Okay, sensory receptors, photoreceptors, pick up light. Sensory input is sent to an integration center, processes information, sends out a motor response. Okay, so you have two main divisions of the nervous system. It's arbitrary. This is just by convention. It's how humans study it. Really, it's one integrated package. But we're going to look at it as two different parts. All right, so here's what we have. Divisions of the nervous system. We have what is called the CNS. That stands for central nervous system. There are only two parts to it, and no more. Your brain and your spinal cord. Nothing else. Then you have the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system consists of 12 pairs of cranial nerves. These are nerves that come out of your brain. And 31 pairs of spinal nerves. Where would you guess those come out of? Yeah, spinal cord. Plus some neuronal cell bodies that are outside of the central nervous system. So neurons, these nerve cells, their cell bodies are typically located in your brain or spinal cord. That's where they live. However, the peripheral nervous system does include some neuronal cell bodies that are not located in the brain or spinal cord. So let's clean this up right here. Just leave it as PNS. Ganglia. That's plural. Neuron cell bodies. Outside of CNS. Okay, so anything called a nerve, could that ever be part of your central nervous system? What do you think? Is it possible to have something called a nerve?
Yeah, would like maybe like a sciatic nerve would be part of musculoskeletal, not nervous?
No, that's not the case.
Oh, okay, I don't know.
Well, I mean, is it possible to have something that's called a nerve and have it be located in the central nervous system?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes?
No.
No.
Never. The central nervous system is only the brain and spinal cord and nothing else. If you see the word nerve, no matter how tempting it is to want to have it be part of the central nervous system, it is not. Anything nerve is peripheral nervous system. That could be like a boutique shop, anything nerve, and everyone's going there. And then your response will be, well, you're anything nerd. Okay, so ganglia is plural. That's neuronal cell bodies outside of the central nervous system. Singular usage, we're talking about one of them is ganglion. Oh, did you notice the lab practicum's graded? Okay. In the end, I didn't have to curve it at all, but I said I would, so I did. Can't promise next time. Oh, the one thing I noticed, not saying anyone here, but in general, it is summer school, so it's kind of hard to wrap everything around your head. Well, make sense of all this and shove it in your head, was plural versus singular usage. So people were tagging things and listing it as, well, I tagged it as a single object, but then they'd give me the plural version of the word. Usually I mark that wrong, no matter what. But that was probably like the single biggest error. So watch out for plural versus singular usage.
So it would be plural if you had like multiple arrows pointing to multiple of them, whereas there's just one arrow pointing to one of them, use the singular.
Exactly. That's exactly it. If someone like they had the answer right, but they were talking about a bunch of them, I just gave it to them. I know it seems nitpicky, but it is nitpicky. It's hard to get when you slap an E on the end versus not, it's like a lot. Okay, so there we go. There's the divisions of the nervous system. Okay, central nervous system, brain and spinal cord. It's the command center, the integration center. Peripheral nervous system. Nerves that are extending from the brain and spinal cord. We have 12 pairs of cranial nerves and 31 pairs of spinal nerves. So all regions of the body are tied into the CNS. Like I said, ganglia are clusters of neuronal cell bodies. Any given ganglia is a ganglion, just one of them. Depends on which one we're talking about. There it is. There's a picture.
And you said the ganglion include the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves.
Well, no, the nerves are nerves, but what a ganglion is a cluster of neuronal cell bodies.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll make more sense shortly.
Okay.
There's like these little bulges. So like here it's showing you little bulges. But nerves are one part of neurons that are like the process known as an axon coming out, typically, or it could be something else. But extensions of the cell. The cells live in the central nervous system, their cell body. Sometimes, though, they're located outside of the CNS in the peripheral nervous system. We'll see what that looks like. Anyway, CNS, brain and spinal cord, PNS, nerves and ganglia. Okay, this again. Okay. So we have two kinds of signals. We have afferent is going towards the CNS and efferent out of the CNS. So the sensory stimulus being brought to the central nervous system, that's an afferent signal towards it. integration occurs, and then efferent signals exit the central nervous system. So efferent signals target muscles and glands. Salivary glands, eccrine sweat glands, anything gland, the nervous system's probably kicking it in. Any muscle contraction is happening via the nervous system, with some exceptions. All right. Well, because of these afferent and efferent signals and sensory, basically sensory signals versus motor signals, we can break up sensory input and motor output into divisions. Okay, so let's look at them. All right, well, right off the bat, we can break all the sensory input and all the motor output into two classes, somatic and visceral. Visceral would apply to your viscera, your organs. So we could have a visceral motor response is talking about a motor response in your organs. Somatic would be skeletal muscle typically. Well, somatic motor is only skeletal muscle, nothing else. So all these awesome muscles we're learning, okay, this contraction brings about this movement, this does this, that's all the somatic motor division. Okay, so somatic is body, visceral is organs. Okay, so the sensory divisions toward the central nervous system, bringing input in. We have SS, somatic sensory. We have VS, visceral sensory. Motor divisions. We have SM, somatic motor division, innervating skeletal muscle. We have the VM, which is the visceral motor system, targeting all your viscera and glands. And those are the divisions right there. But then we have some little nuances with sensory. We have your special senses, such as seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and equilibrium. Your special senses. Now those are grouped with somatic sensory and visceral sensory. Okay, so what's considered SS, but its special senses would be vision, hearing, and equilibrium. What's considered VS, visceral sensory, would be gustation, which is a fancy word for taste, gustatory delights, and olfaction, smelling things. Okay. All right, so somatic motor is straightforward. That's just innervation of skeletal muscle, a motor response is sent out, biceps brachii contracts. Visceral motor, innervation of salivary glands, you start to salivate, eccrine sweat glands. Speeding up the rate of digestion in your digestive tract, modifying your heart rate, your heart's speeding up, your heart's slowing down, these sort of things. Okay. Now, here's where sensory is a little trickier. Somatic sensory are widespread general senses. So somatic sensory is basically innervation of your outer body tube. So all these sensory receptors that are in your integument, Pacinian corpuscles, Merkel cells, Messner's corpuscles, and there's many, many more. Those are just some of them that we looked at. Pain receptors in your skin, dermis pain receptors, temperature receptors, all these sort of receptors, those are all considered SS division, somatic sensory. What else is considered SS, somatic sensory? In your outer body tube, you have receptors in joints that detect the amount of stretch in the joint. And in your skeletal muscle, you also have receptors that pick up how much is that muscle being stretched. Ultimately, that results in, it's called proprioception, a sense of where your body part is in space. It's why you can close your eyes and hold your arm out and you know where your arm's located. So basically any sensory input or sensory receptors located in your outer body tube are considered SS division. For your special senses, vision is grouped with SS division, hearing and equilibrium. Hearing and equilibrium are together. The receptors for that is located in the petrous region of your temporal bone. Cruise on in that external acoustic meatus, go through your tympanic membrane. Then there's some little tiny bones that amplify sound whacking on your eardrum. And then you have the receptors for hearing and equilibrium, or the organs for that. Now, gustation and olfaction, these are considered VS, visceral sensory, for whatever reason. They can elicit visceral motor responses. Perhaps that's why. Such as gustation and olfaction can elicit nausea. You walk into a room and the familiar smell of a rat rotting in the wall blasts your nostrils. And you immediately start to get nauseous because you're programmed, like Pavlov's dogs that salivate whenever they heard a bell. You smell carrion, you want to vomit. Okay, so that's visceral motor. Visceral sensory, and it's kind of uncontrollable. So visceral sensory from special senses would elicit that. So these are the divisions. Any questions on this? Okay. There we go. It's another big picture. Well, this is a flow chart of sorts. Well, heck. Okay, here's a little trick. Okay. So, visceral sensory, that's basically sensory input coming from your inner body tube and viscera. Well, your inner body tube is made up by your digestive tract, basically. That's your inner tube. So your viscera, anything happening with them, that's visceral sensory. A response is sent out, visceral motor, after some integration, but you're not really thinking about it. Do you think about things moving through your small intestine being absorbed? Typically not. If you're nauseous, you're nauseous, and you're going to uncontrollably vomit. And there's not a whole lot you can do about it. So the VM, the visceral motor division, is known as the ANS, autonomic nervous system. And you could kind of say it has a mind of its own. You're not consciously controlling the ANS. Unless you're a Buddhist monk meditating for years in Tibet, you can actually affect some of your visceral motor. But us, no. Or you can recall a really scary event and your heart starts beating fast and other visceral motor responses kick in. Okay, so your autonomic nervous system is the visceral motor. Could think of it as the involuntary nervous system division. The autonomic nervous system. It has two divisions, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. So the autonomic nervous system, those are the two divisions. It is a motor division. It is not a sensory division. Its target is smooth muscle and glands. The somatic motor division, its target, skeletal muscle. So the motor response for SM is skeletal muscle, and that's it. VM targets smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands. Sympathetic seems like it would be sympathetic. The sympathetic division is not sympathetic. It is the sympathetic division. It's not nice. It's your fight or flight response. The sympathetic division, your pupils dilate to let as much light in as possible so you can see better. You might start to sweat. Your heart rate increases. Blood is redirected from your digestive tract and viscera and sent to your skeletal muscle because you're going to have to run for your life. And you'll get a surge of adrenaline. That is the sympathetic, fight or flight. The parasympathetic is rest and digest. Pupils constrict, low light level, digestion kicks in, all that. The two oppose one another. Stimulatory and inhibitory effects from both of them. One elicits one response and the other reverses the response. Okay, so there we have it. Now we're ready to look at the big flow chart. Okay, your CNS, brain and spinal cord, the integration control centers. PNS, cranial nerves and spinal nerves. 12 pairs of cranial, 31 pairs of spinal. Communication lines between the CNS and the rest of your body. That's what the PNS does. Sensory, afferent division. SS and VS. So it brings receptor information to the CNS. Here's an example, skin, all those awesome receptors. And we only looked at just a little taste of them. There's many more in your skin we didn't look at. That's an SS fiber to your CNS, outer body tube. VS, visceral sensory fiber, detecting stretch in your stomach. Bam, to the CNS. Okay, motor, efferent division. Impulses from the CNS, the effectors, muscles and glands. SM division. Impulses from the CNS to skeletal muscles. That's its only target, nothing else. ANS, the VM, involuntary division. CNS, the cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, and glands. Can break it up into sympathetic division, mobilizes your body systems during activity. Fight or flight. Parasympathetic, rest and digest. Okay, sympathetic motor fibers showing one going to your heart. Your heart rate increases. You also have parasympathetic to your heart. Heart rate decreases. Parasympathetic to ANS, bladder. Bladder's full, it's time to urinate or micturate. Sympathetic will shut that down. No time to pee if you're going to die and have to run. Oh, on and on. Okay. SS. I told you, receptors spread throughout the outer tube. General senses. General senses are widespread. Special senses are concentrated in your head. It's all in your head. Vision, hearing, equilibrium, SS division. 3 special, and then widespread general. Touch, pain, vibration, pressure, temperature. A fly crawling on your arm, bending a hair, stimulates a hair root plexus, and that signals scent. Okay. Proprioception, that is also somatic sensory. Detects stretch and tendons and muscle. What's happening in joints. What that does is it gives you a body sense, position and movement of your body in space. Special somatic, definitely not smell. These 3, vision and hearing and balance. Hearing and balance are tied together. The organs for this are right next door to each other and the petrous part of your temporal bone. VS. Anything happening in your viscera. Inner body tube. Stretch, pain, temperature, nausea, and hunger. Those are all general visceral. Digestive, urinary tracts, reproductive organs. Viscera. Special visceral senses. Taste and smell. Okay, SM. Voluntary, the voluntary nervous system. Somatic motor. Skeletal muscle. Visceral motor. Contraction of smooth muscle, cardiac muscle. Stimulate glands. The autonomic nervous system. So there we have it. Those are divisions of the nervous system. So that's the nervous system overall. Where we're going to go here is talking about nervous tissue. So what's it made up of and all that. And then we're going to we'll look at some differences between nervous tissue and the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. And then we'll move on to defining nerves, which are organs. And then we'll talk about some more just how things are working overall. And then that's it for chapter 12. Then we jump into the central nervous system, looking at the brain and spinal cord. And then we look at the peripheral nervous system. And my favorite is the autonomic nervous system. You only get a little taste of it. Just a small taste. Okay, so we have 2 main cell types in nervous tissue. Neurons, which are the actual cells that conduct a signal, a nerve impulse, and action potential. So the actual neurons themselves, and then what are called neuroglia or neuroglia. Neuroglial cells literally means neuro, means nerve, and then glia, glue, nerve glue. Support cells. They outnumber neurons like 6 to 1, 5 to 1, something like that. Who cares? There's more of them than there are neurons. That's ridiculous. Neuroglial cells are in the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. Sorry, I have to watch out for these publisher slideshows. There's typos. Okay. So the neurons transmit the action potential, nerve impulse. Neuroglial cells do not. They're just there to support the neurons. Okay, so what's the neuron? Well, it conducts the electrical impulse. Here's some features of your neurons. So nerve impulse action potential, that's all about the neuron. How does it really work? How do they convey the electrical signal? Stay tuned for physiology. I'll tell you briefly how it works, but I'm not explaining it. You have to go to physiology for that. Okay, neurons. Do not divide. Once you're fully developed, that's it. You have the neurons you have, and you're not getting any more. Do you want to go unconscious at the bottom of the pool for X number of minutes? No, you don't. So no mitosis once you are fully developed. Okay, I guess your brain grows as you're a child, but once you reach maturity, that's it. Can last 100 years. Your neurons can outlive you. High oxygen and glucose need. They need it. Neurons are energetically expensive. They use a lot of energy, which means they need a lot of oxygen, glucose. Why? Because they have a lot of mitochondria, which are making a lot of ATP, the energy. So, deprive them of sugar and oxygen, death to the neurons. Think like if they're cut off from oxygen for a certain amount of time, it runs out. I forgot the exact number, but it's like 1,900,000 die a minute after 4 minutes or something. That's how the rate at which they start dying. 1,900,000 a minute. So don't play with plastic bags.
Professor, what about those people who can hold their breath for really long times? Would that happen to them, or do they train somehow?
Well, they they can hold their breath for 4 minutes.
Yeah, or somewhere around there. I think might be a little more than that.
More than 4 minutes?
I thought, but I don't know for sure.
I think David Blaine held it for hours.
Yeah, I have no idea. We call them freaks. No, I don't know. Yeah, Well, whales, what they do is they have a lot of, so you have hemoglobin, your red blood cells. It's the oxygen transport molecule. When it gets to your muscles, it ditches the oxygen and hands it off to myoglobin, which is the oxygen transport molecule located in your muscle. Whales have a ridiculous amount, particularly sperm whales, have a ridiculous amount of myoglobin. So what they do is the myoglobin's holding all this oxygen. So the sperm whales, because they dive so deep, they'll have pressure issues. They actually collapse their lungs, the sperm whales, when they dive to the bottom of the ocean. They collapse their lungs and all the oxygen is located in myoglobin. So they have a source of oxygen. That's how they can stay down for so long, the marine mammal. So maybe those people that hold their breath so much have a bunch of myoglobin. I don't know. Yeah. But once you're cut off from oxygen, your neurons run out, they're going to die at a ridiculous rate, and you're not getting them back. So people that like to sniff glue, well, you hear the old saying, you're killing brain cells. Okay, it's 5 minutes. I said 4. Okay, longevity. Live and function for a lifetime. Outlast you 100 years. Do not divide. Fetal neurons no longer undergo mitosis. Neural stem cells, yeah, I mean, development, you have some stem cells. Okay, high metabolic rate, they need ATP. Nerve impulses, that electrical signal, are energetically expensive. So how does this electricity happen in your body and cells? Ions, electrolytes basically move in and out of the cell and it generates a charge difference. So that's how it's generated. That's it. That's all I'll say. Oh, this junk. We don't need all this. All the different structures in them. Who cares? Okay. So like I told you, most neuronal cell bodies are located within the central nervous system. Any neuronal cell bodies outside of the central nervous system are called ganglia. That's plural. We're talking about any one of them, the specific one. For instance, one is called the celiac ganglion. That is a specific one. That's plural. That is singular. Okay, fine. Yeah, you have these chromatophilic bodies, Nissl bodies in the neuron cell body. It's just a bunch of rough yarn ribosomes. Whatever, it's just in the cell. Okay, so here we go. Here's our prototypical neuron. Okay, here's our prototypical neuron. We have the cell body. Okay, I'm going to draw this looking a little bit like a rutabaga. Okay, cell body. Okay, there's a nucleus in there, and then these Nissl bodies, chromatophilic bodies, meaning they like color, they stain. It's just a bunch of rough ER. Golgi organelles, right? Now we have these dendritic extensions, like we had with the melanocytes, how the melanocytes have these little octopus arms sticking up through the keratinocytes to shuttle melanin up. Okay. We have these dendritic extensions. Okay. And then there's a particularly long dendritic extension. That terminates in all these fine branches. So that's a neuron. Okay, well, let's talk about these dendritic extensions. Okay, so over here, these are called dendrites. And these are typically going to be the receptive regions of the neuron. They receive a signal, and the neuron's going to get excited. This long one I drew coming out, this is called an axon. Where it has all the branching, extensive branching at the end. This is the terminal arborization, like a tree, terminal branching. And then what we have at the end are synaptic terminals. Now your book's going to call the synaptic terminals at the very end terminal boutons. I'm calling it synaptic terminals. But if you really want to know, what's that terminal bouton? Sounds like something like a crouton. Okay. So here's the deal. One neuron touches another. So these synaptic terminals, you see at the lower right end of the awesome drawing here, will touch the dendrites, the receptive regions of the next neuron. And this neuron right here, other neurons would have sent a nerve impulse to this neuron. So it's kind of like a relay race. Or, I don't know, hands across America, everybody touching hands. So the receptive region, the signal from a prior neuron, signal comes in here, moves through, and then blasts down this axon and out the synaptic terminals to whatever this neuron's touching. Another neuron, could be a skeletal muscle fiber, something like that. So action potential moves that way. So where the axon joins the cell body, this thickened region, it's called the axon hillock, like a little hill. There we go. Okay. So the cell body, basically the biosynthetic center, things are being made, receptive region. Okay, the dendrites, receptive regions. Nerve impulse comes in. Okay. The nerve impulse is generated, intensifies the signal that the neuron's going to shoot out, fire, in the axon hillock. So it generates and it fires off. Now at the end, bam, quick. Okay, so that's showing you impulse direction. So that's the axon. Nucleolus, who cares? It's just where a bunch of ribosomes are synthesized. We don't care about that. Okay. Here's your terminal boutons, the very tips. Also, I call it synaptic end bulb, synaptic terminals. It's all the same thing. Okay, and you have extensive branching. Okay, so there's your neuron.